Hello. Good morning and welcome to the final day of the GovRAMP Learning Series, preparing for the Cyber Summit. I'm Olivia Maple, Membership Manager at GovRAMP, and I'll be your host today. This week, we've been bringing everyone back to the basics, helping both providers and government agencies get grounded in key practices that support secure cloud adoption and stronger partnerships across the ecosystem. On day one, we looked at the private sector perspective. On day two, we focused on how governments approach procurement and risk evaluation. And today, we'll bring both sides together for a combined focus on security, oversight, and partnerships, and how agencies can provide and move beyond silos to build real trust. Here's how today's session will flow. We'll begin with a keynote presentation, then we'll move into a panel discussion, and finally, we'll close with optional office hours where you can ask GovRAMP leadership and the PMO your questions. To start us off, I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speakers, Pete Dudek, Associate Director at A-LIGN and a GovRAMP Champion member, and Alex Whitworth, Sales Director at Carahsoft. Pete and Alex bring both provider and partner perspectives, and together they'll help us look at how requirements and expectations are shaping the future of cloud security and oversight. I'll guide the conversation with a few questions. Alex, let's start with you. How do you see automation shaping the future of monitoring and reporting for providers?
Yeah, good question. And I appreciate you having me here today to be a part of this great series and this great event. So automation, I see automation changing compliance in some major ways, right? If you look at the FedRAMP 20X initiative, it relies on automated validation of security controls, and it's a shift away from point-in-time narrative-based documentation. So it's all about speeding up authorization, reducing costs for CSPs, and bringing more innovation into government faster. And to achieve this, the automated validations, there will be tools needed to effectively and accurately validate controls, validate compliance. So the CSPs themselves, the GRC providers, this new cadre of AI native GRC capabilities, and the industry of advisors and accelerators are poised to help bring that automation in and fast track compliance validation. I think AI will also help us accelerate harmonization, right? When you think about the convergence of AI and compliance, the momentum for AI deployments seems to really be here, right? The efficiency drivers are here in a big way. And in the risk and compliance world, how do we break out of the system of labor-heavy, painstaking documentation and assessment process, this continuous audit loop with multiple siloed individual assessments, and take full advantage of AI's capabilities to continuously validate against compliance standards? And when there's a deviation or a failure at the control level, automatically deploy agentic capabilities to remediate and revalidate compliance. So it feels like that future is right around the corner. That the dream of having a self-healing system feels like it's almost here. So from that perspective, automation really has the potential to be revolutionary, as we're seeing in many aspects of business, government, life generally.
Absolutely. Well, Pete, when a service provider is just beginning its cloud journey, what does mapping frameworks to real operations actually look like in practice?
Yeah, and thanks, Olivia and GovRAMP team for having me as well. Super excited to participate in this and looking forward to the summit here in the coming weeks. So, great question. So, the biggest component of mapping to a framework like GovRAMP, right, which sits on NIST 853, is taking, like for CSP, taking your business functions and applying them to each control to see like a true gap analysis, right? So kind of looking at three different aspects as you're going through the control set. GovRAMP Moderate, for example, right, I think has 319 controls off the top of my head. So with each control, right, it's, do we have a policy and procedure for this? How is it technically implemented or configured? How are we doing this operationally? And can we actually provide the evidence and artifacts that would suffice for what the control is asking for? Just that in-depth, complete gap analysis is a great start, because then on the CSP level, you know where your shortcomings are. You can help create those POAM items and set targets to actually get compliant throughout the whole entire framework. And that's, we work with a network of advisory advisory-based firms, right, that truly help in that process as far as digging in, conducting that gap analysis with CSPs, and then offering those recommendations to implement controls that are up to par with GovRAMP and FedRAMP requirements.
Okay. Well, Alex, building on that, what upcoming federal or state regulations should agencies be preparing for now?
I appreciate the question. There's certainly a lot happening in the regulatory and policy environment right now, right? At the federal level, the government is focused on removing barriers and accelerating the ATO process as much as possible to bring innovative tech into government faster, right? The FedRAMP 20X initiative, the Software Fast Track initiative on the DoD side, I think are illustrative examples. I'd say another key policy that has momentum is harmonization. There's so many standards that organizations have to be aware of and focused on, right? FedRAMP, GovRAMP, CGIS, PCI, FISMA, and it's really cool to see the work that GovRAMP is doing to harmonize with other compliance standards, right? The overlays with CGIS, the fast track work with HITRUST. This idea of a single assessment for multiple standards, right? It feels like we're at a moment where the standards bodies and lawmakers are recognizing the need to harmonize, and the work is underway at many levels. Another example of this, there's a pair of senators, bipartisan, that introduced legislation in May of this year that would establish an executive branch panel to study this problem of conflicting cyber regulations. So hopefully we see that move forward. I would say another key area to watch is AI policy. The White House has released a series of memos and guidance on accelerating the use of AI, right? The efficient acquisition of AI, an AI action plan. I think these things will help affect the FedRAMP process both directly and indirectly. From a direct perspective, right? Last week, GSA announced they're prioritizing 20x authorizations for AI solutions. So they want to get OpenAI, Anthropic, Google Gemini into the hand of government operators by the end of calendar year 2025. And they're forcing the evolution of the FedRAMP process to get these products ATO'd, right? So this sprint of change, I think, will benefit every capability that comes behind it. Right now, there's a new faster lane to get to ATO. And then from an indirect perspective, this new set of policies is focused on driving AI innovation in our country, and that innovation would happen at within every vertical of technology, right? Including systems that automate compliance validation, which I think will serve to accelerate FedRAMP ATOs, GovRAMP ATOs, and then further enable this process of harmonization.
So yeah, that's fantastic. And Pete, finally, how can agencies evaluate whether a partner truly understands their security and regulatory obligations?
Yeah, a great place to start, right? FedRAMP Marketplace and the GovRAMP authorized product list, right? Because those CSPs that show as ready or as authorized, those agencies can have that level of comfort that they've gone to someone like us as a 3PAO, right, to do that in-depth security analysis. I mean, for full initial SARs, right, we do manual control testing, vulnerability scan processing, penetration testing. So those agencies should have the utmost confidence that those CSPs are following GovRAMP and FedRAMP requirements. Another thing too is just checking to see how they're handling continuous monitoring. I mean, just by nature of being in a program like GovRAMP or FedRAMP, right, with monthly ConMon responsibilities as far as monthly vulnerability scanning, monthly POAM, inventory updates, how they're doing incident response testing, if they're keeping up with their annual audits as well. So everything like that kind of leads into, again, for the confidence level of an agency to feel good about picking a product off that marketplace listing. And then lastly, just the shared responsibility model and the clarity around that, right? So a good service provider will have that clear delineation of responsibility, control by control. Hey, as a service provider, we are responsible for A, and you as the agency are responsible for B, right? So just providing that clarity throughout the whole framework sets the confidence level, again, for what an agency is signing up for at the end of the day is where I'm getting at as far as what they're going to be responsible for that specific offering and product.
No, absolutely. That's incredibly insightful. And I just want to thank you, Pete and Alex, for giving us that great overview and for grounding us for today's discussion in the bigger picture. So again, we thank you for your time. You've been amazing keynotes, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the session. But for now, we're going to go ahead and transition to our panel, where our panel session, From Silo to Shared, Building Real Partnerships for Cloud Risk Management. I'm joined today by leaders who bring deep experience in strengthening governance, evaluating risk, and creating partnerships that moved beyond baseline requirements to build real trust. First, Emily Larimer, Executive Director of Enterprise GRC and Resiliency at the State of Indiana. Emily leads governance and resiliency initiatives across state government and works directly with providers to strengthen collaboration. Next, Matt Connor, Chief Information Security Officer at Second Front Systems. Matt brings the provider perspective, helping bridge the gap between innovative cloud solutions and government adoption. And finally, Dan Frei, Director of Business Operations for the Division of Technology Services with the State of Utah, one of our participating governments. Dan offers the public sector perspective, sharing how states are approaching cloud oversight and partnering with providers to manage risk. Together, they will share real-world lessons about how partnerships can shift from siloed approaches to more collaborative models of security and oversight. So to start us off, when you think about partnerships in cloud security, what does shared responsibility mean in practice between providers and government? And more specifically, on the government front, what does shared responsibility mean when coordinating across legal, procurement, and IT teams?
Well, who wants to go first? Is this one me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So I will start with saying shared responsibility. The first thing I think of is communication. Lots and lots of communication, and every area needs to understand what their responsibilities are. You want to make sure you're avoiding assumptions and trying to cover key, gaps in any key areas, that just making sure everybody's very clear on where their nose ends and someone else begins with the compliance requirements and who needs to be doing what. So a lot of good cadence and good conversation goes a long way with the shared responsibility models.
So yeah, I'll emphasize that from the provider perspective, and I should also disclose that I'm a recovering authorizing official from government, so I've seen both sides of the house. But yeah, that transparency and most importantly, documentation and dialogue. I'll probably be talking about playbooks a couple of different times today. The necessity to clearly trace the shared responsibility model, the yours, mine, and ours there, understand inheritance, understand, like Emily was just saying, sort of where one person's nose begins and ends. That is, to me, is the pro tip for negotiating a shared responsibility model. And there's just simply no substitute for clear, racy understanding of who's going to do what and where that guidance applies.
And I'm, I guess, number 3. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Like Olivia said, I am with the State of Utah. And so when looking at, you have legal, who is going to be looking at protecting the state, and they're going to be taking a long time to make sure all the terms and conditions are just right. You have procurement, they got to abide by the state procurement laws. So they have a different look at this. And then you have IT, which is getting pressure from the business to implement. And then you have security as part of IT that's going to make sure vendors are playing by the security policies. You have all 3 of these that are looking at it differently. And for real world successes, just a couple of things we did to share with you is that, first of all, you have to look at the big picture. And you're like, how do we implement something fast that also protects the state and is secure? And so one of the things we did is we had a contract analyst that knew the legal. So they knew what legal was looking at. They knew what procurement would be looking at. And then also what IT and security is looking at. So having that kind of in the middle really helped speed up the process. So it doesn't have to get stopped by every single section looking at a different way.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I'll keep it. Oh, go.
I was just going to add, so Dan reminded me of the importance of empathy. It sounds a little crunchy, but empathy, the tension between some of those organizations and the imperatives that Dan was just talking about in terms of velocity and responsibility, having empathy for each respective role. I mean, each one of those functions, legal, procurement, and security or IT, has their part to play in risk management. Each of them is essentially, offering insurance to the organization to ensure that negative consequences don't occur. So I know we approach these sometimes as these competing priorities, but having that empathy for the respective roles, I think, is critical as well.
Absolutely. Emily, I'll go ahead and bring it back to you for this one, but what challenges do you see when agencies and providers aren't aligned on those responsibilities?
That's where the vulnerabilities and threats sneak in. So that's really a key part, making sure that everybody's on the same page and understanding what their roles are and how to work together. I'll go back to the empathy comment is really important because that helps build those relationships with people. We spend a lot of time talking about technology, but it's the people that's making it run and the relationships we have with each other. So understanding where potential gaps might be is a really big part of this. And like I said, that's part of the risk management process and understanding where the threats can sneak in. Being proactive about it, having those ongoing conversations and making sure that you jump on it quickly if you recognize that there's something that needs to be synthesized or synced up with the other party.
Dan?
Yeah, as we look into this and we think of what can we do here, as been mentioned, it's really important to know that each of the roles are important, and each of the roles have unique perspectives, and so we need to look at it like, okay, what are we trying to accomplish, right? To get each of the groups what are we trying to accomplish here, and how can we do this in a meaningful way that protects the state, provides that risk management, and so that's where it's really good to collaborate on this, as it kind of has been mentioned.
Yeah. Then Matt, do you have any other final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like the idea of sort of what are we trying to do here. I think it's easy when we talk about compliance and we talk about deployments and we talk about equities, those kinds of things, to lose sight of the fact that ultimately we're trying to field capabilities to serve a need, and that's to serve the public, or we deliver a lot to defense environments. And there's a leader that I really respect who says that bad software kills. And so if you think about, if we let process challenges or stakeholder conflict or those seams stop us from delivering technology at the speed of need, at the speed of risk, what we're ultimately doing is we're hurting people. So whether that's the public's access to applications that they need, whether that's defense users or decision makers accessing the technology that they need to keep them safe, those kinds of things. The real consequence of these challenges is unmet IT needs, unmet capabilities. And I think that's the real risk we're running. So it's good for us at times to step back and think like, we're arguing about this or arguing about that. What are we all trying to do here? We're trying to put technology in the hands of people who need it, where they need it, at the speed of need, at the speed of threat.
Great. Yeah. Well, Matt, while we have you here, how do you approach building trust between government and provider teams?
Yeah, I think there's no substitute for dialogue, right? I think Emily opened us up talking about communication, and what we've seen here is, I don't know, perhaps academically it is possible to over communicate, but I don't think we've reached that point yet. And so, and there's no substitute for that continuous dialogue. We've seen success in developing, like I mentioned, playbooks. There's probably, it's There are deep dive sessions. We've done windshield tours. We've done technology demos, those kinds of things to provide comfort to decision makers in government that they're comfortable operating at the acceptable risk threshold. And then there's a feedback loop, right? So when they want something tuned, when they have specific prerogative around specific policies, specific controls, specific technologies, those kinds of things, we take those requirements on board and make sure we're giving those people the insights that they need to make decisions.
Thank you. Yeah. And for Emily and Dan, on top of that, how do you keep the relationship alive post-contract? What does continuous collaboration look like for you?
Go ahead, Dan.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll keep them brief. So, the vendors we like to do business with, right? That's the ones of how to keep a relationship alive post-contract. So, good communication. It's not like the sale happens and then they kind of go away, but the vendor has many touch points, making sure both parties understand what's happening and what value is. What's the value of this relationship? And that happens throughout the year. I'm in procurement, so a good partnership also is that we don't get a renewal the next year. That's like 20+% increase. So that's another good way to keep the partnership, is that you just have renewals that are typically like inflation type of increases. You have metrics in place. So how do we know we're hitting what we said we're set out to do in the contract? So good partners have metrics in place and they can show us. Some people have like quarterly business reviews that these metrics can be looked at by both parties. Quick response, email, text, whatever, but we're getting quick response. Contract negotiations. The vendors are meeting the terms and conditions. We don't have to worry about that in the contract. There's training if there's new things that come through during the year. They're training us on that. And then bottom line, results. The long-term partner is going to show us results for our investment. So those are some quick things that I thought of that to keep the relationship contract.
Yeah, I'll just add real quickly. I think one of our keys is understanding just from a basic level staff turnover. Something as simple as making sure you know who to contact and when, and accounting for that with the contracts and making sure that new folks that come in on either side are looped in with the conversations and brought up to speed can make a really big difference in continuing a trust relationship. And with state government, we see quite a bit of turnover at times and sometimes not. Sometimes you got people that have been around a long time. We often rely on the vendors who have been here for years with their contract as well to make sure that we understand the nature of the agreement and we're all able to move forward together in a positive way. So just a real basic thing, making sure you know who to contact sometimes can mean all the difference between whether the engagement is successful or not.
Absolutely. I did see a question come through in our Q&A for you all, so I'm going to go ahead and read that. But do you have any success stories from or tips for smaller municipalities with limited resources in your states when dealing with SaaS providers? Other than looking for providers that are already GovRAMP certified, it's hard when one person is IT, risk, and procurement.
Good luck. So Indiana, we are a little bit, I'll say, spoiled rotten. We have a local government program that IoT helps support for our local municipalities. So we've got several opportunities to help leverage our procurement resources to help our local government groups. And so big things like several of our cybersecurity tools, for example, we are able to provide those or make those available for our local governments to purchase. And so the seat where I'm sitting and under our state CISO, that's probably our best way to help support local governments and understanding it can be difficult to be one person who's trying to do the entire, procurement lifecycle and then manage the contract afterwards. So if you have that type of opportunity in your state, that would be great. If not, maybe petition your state IT department to see if you can work together on something like that to help everybody. Because it strengthens the whole state. It's not just the municipalities. You shouldn't be out there by yourself having to, fight off all the bad guys.
Yeah, as Emily said, we have the same type of program. We have statewide contracts that all locals and municipalities can buy off of, and we're actually helping a lot of their cyber tools available and providing cyber tools with that SLC GP grant. So,
just to chime in from a different perspective here. So for under-resourced organizations, I know that there's an ability to scale by leveraging others. So a smart person learns from their own mistakes, and a wise person learns from the mistakes of others. I know that I have reached out to other peers in other organizations and asked them for their perspectives. So in terms of due diligence, like I can reach out to CISOs and say, have you dealt with this partner? Have you dealt with this vendor? Have those kinds of things. I'm not sure what kind of analogs exist for government folks or at the state and local level, but I know, when I previously led, for example, the CISOs of the intelligence community, we did a lot of what have you done? What have you learned? What mistakes have you made so that I don't make them again? I would hope that there are analogs for that. And if not, maybe you guys can be the catalyst for change and create those dialogues, because one person responsible for all those things simply doesn't scale for all the needs. I'd also say take advantage of, like programs like GovRAMP. When GovRAMP is but when GovRAMP has authorized services and they're available in the marketplace, or FedRAMP or vendors who have achieved certain DoD standards, I think that those types of assurances can underscore that the software services are fit for purpose for state and local needs as well. So I think there's efficiencies to be realized there too.
Absolutely. Great answers. And what I want to say too to our audience today is please continue to use that Q&A if you have any questions. I'll make sure they get answered, whether it's in the call or after the call. We will get to your questions. So the next one I have for our panel today is, what role do frameworks like GovRAMP, FedRAMP, or state-specific programs play in setting expectations? Emily, I'll go to you first.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we're really excited about, we have an executive order now in the state of Indiana that is directing us to adopt a RAMP program, and we've selected to work with the GovRAMP folks, and they've been fantastic. And one of the reasons I'm really excited about this is because it does help answer a lot of questions for vendors on what those expectations are going to be, which frameworks to use, what controls they need to follow, what we will and won't accept. And it really helps take out some of the gray area. Now I say that, and we very recently posted our policy for review, and there's still some conversation happening. And that's part of that stakeholder engagement and really working with the vendors on understanding what the impact's going to be on both sides. But as we kind of work through that and move towards a RAMP program, RAMP, the P is a program, move towards our RAMP future and with compliance for our cloud products, again, that removal of that gray area, helping focus our agencies on this is the type of compliance environment that we need to move towards with a lot of the legacy systems as you're looking to modernize and update your systems and budgeting out, over the next 2 to 10 years. What do you need to plan for? Compliance needs to be part of that, and here's the frameworks you can use. So that really makes it brings a lot of clarity to the compliance process. It really helps cut down on the number of questions that I get and our teams across, IoT in the state of Indiana technology support get. And like I said, we're really looking forward to, as we roll this out with GovRAMP, having the additional support of that sort of organization that can also, have direct contact with the vendors as well and work with them and provide feedback to us in a structured way. So all of that is, I think, going to be a net positive for us at IoT and for the state of Indiana.
Dan.
So it's probably time for a story. Break it up.
We'd love to hear it.
So we were so many years we've been doing IT contracts, and many years we put the contracts together. We talked about the legal and procurement and security, and so we're negotiating the T's and C's. We get them all ready. We get the contract in place. We enact the contract. It's going along. We think it's going well, and then our partner agencies say, well, how do you know that the vendor is abiding by the security terms and conditions, specifically NIST? And our answer was, well, it's in the contract, so they have to be abiding by it. But that's like, well, how are you verifying this? How are you verifying that they're abiding by the terms? And so we were putting in a program where we were trying to figure it out, and we were trying to put in a program of self-attestation. We were going to send out letters to all the vendors saying, you attest that you are abiding by the terms and conditions. So we were about to do something like that when we decided instead to do GovRAMP. And so GovRAMP is that compliance, is that to make sure the vendors are abiding by the terms and conditions, especially the NIST terms and security terms. So anyway, that at least sets out expectations through the life of the contract.
Yeah, and Matt.
Yeah, I just, so a couple of different ways to think about this. One is the continuous monitoring requirements of the control frameworks is critical to monitoring drift. And I know, as a former authorizing official, one of the frustrations I had, especially sort of trapped in like the 3-year ATO cycle back in the day, was you make a decision at a moment in time, and then, we know that drift begins immediately. So the continuous monitoring requirements of these control frameworks, I think, are providing assurance to partners, to government, that we're continuing to build and maintain the risk appetite that was expressed by the sponsor or by the customer. I think that's critical. From my perspective, also as a vendor, those types of frameworks are critical for us understanding requirements. And we need predictability. We need transparency. Emily mentioned transparency. We need transparency to understand how to deliver what features, services our customers, our sponsors need. We need to be able to forecast those. And so, rolling back also to one of the previous questions in terms of, like, how do you maintain these relationships, those kinds of things. Events like this, continuing education series, are critical for us to understand what's coming down the pike, what's happening now, how are implementers thinking about it, how are governments thinking about it. These kinds of dialogues are critical. And we've seen, in the FedRAMP dialogue right now, happening sort of in public, great bidirectional communication between the community, the PMO, and those kinds of things. And I think that, we've talked about communication a couple of different times here today. There's just no substitute for that. So adopting frameworks like GovRAMP give us transparency. They also yield efficiencies and reuse. You can look at a GovRAMP authorized solution and have trust that it meets your needs. It's a shortcut for due diligence, not completely displacing it, but certainly efficiencies to be realized.
Absolutely. And Matt, I'll stick with you here for a second. Can you share an example of a successful partnership that overcame silos to create better outcomes?
With government in general, or with partners, or however I think about it.
However you think about it.
Sure. Well, our DNA is in defense, and so our partnership with the Defense Innovation Unit, we developed our platform to accelerate technology insertion into secure enclaves into the Defense Department. Those
U.S. government program that sets security standards for cloud services. So it's in essence just only cloud.
Sorry, there was a little bit.
If anybody else has their mic off mute besides our panelists, if you could please just check and mute your mic, we'd really appreciate it. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
That's okay. So, we're sponsored by the Defense Innovation Unit, which is the DoD's innovation cell, specifically to bring independent software vendors, small companies, through the authorization process at the speed of need, at the speed of mission. And so that dialogue and developing the platform, developing the insights that authorizing officials need to make decisions about workload approvals, giving them insight into continuous monitoring and the continued measurable state of cybersecurity posture. We've fielded hundreds of capabilities now into defense environments, cutting months or years off of authorization processes, which is very timely now with the administration's push towards acceleration, automation, AI, like the panel, the keynote speakers were addressing. So I think that's really yield successes for us, and our success. And well, got my corporate sweatshirt on here. We believe that software development, software delivery is defense and is protecting America. So we're happy to play our part.
I love that. And Emily and Dan, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
I'll just jump in and quickly say this current transition in partnership with GovRAMP, as we've been reaching out and talking to our vendors that are currently engaged with the state of Indiana, has actually been a really positive move forward. There's been a lot of anxiety, of course, and what's the policy going to say, and how are we going to do this, and what does this mean for our contracts? But there's also the residual has been, and the best part of this has been, how do we get into a more compliant future, and how do we get to a more secure future, right? Not just compliance, but also it's security of the data, it's public trust, it's how do we continue to provide services to our constituents in Indiana, and do so in a way that, you know, is in a more modernized future with some continuous monitoring, some risk management, making sure that we're actually doing a good job of doing our job at IoT, and making sure we're taking care of everybody's information. So that, again, it's been a lot of conversations. I call them the inefficient but highly effective conversations that we've been having with folks across our agencies and our vendor partners. And as a result, we've had a lot of good conversations and you know, projecting into the future. What is this going to look like? What are we trying to get to? You know, how do we work together to get there? And that's been a really positive benefit of this, the conversation in general. Hopefully we can roll that forward, and as we get new contracts and new things in place, and you know, fully implement our RAMP policy, we can carry that forward for the next few years and move to the future that we're all working on together. So that's been a really positive part of, you know, something that's caused a little bit of anxiety for folks, and there's been a lot of questions, and how do we do this? But again, residual of putting a bunch of smart people together to talk about how do we do this better for Indiana, that's been cool for me to see.
So for us, we call ourselves the Division of Technology Services. It's the state of Utah IT, and our mission is to provide secure technology solutions. So cybersecurity is top of mind for us, and we're always trying to figure out how do we increase our cybersecurity policy. And so GovRAMP is one of those things that is really going to help us with increasing our cybersecurity and our posture, and making sure it's one more tool in our tool chest that's going to really help. And we're brand new. We're brand new to GovRAMP. We just started implementing GovRAMP. Well, I guess 6 months ago is when we started planning, but just since July 1st is when we're really starting the requirement that GovRAMP is in new solicitations. So this is a new journey for us, and we're looking forward to the future.
Yeah, well, you all have been wonderful partners, and this has been an extremely insightful conversation. So let's take some time for questions from the audience. Like I said, you guys are free to drop that in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'll make sure our panelists have the chance to respond. So I'll just give you guys a moment. And if we don't have any questions from our audience,
it looks like we got another question in the Q&A, Olivia, actually, if you missed that one.
Let me go back. I can only see one still. Oh, I see it.
I'm also happy to read it aloud if you'd like me to.
I think is it, how does your state break down silos with municipalities to communicate and assist them with managing and reducing vendor risk?
That is a great question. and an ongoing conversation, I think. And again, I'll point back to our local government program, regular meeting regularly with the municipalities and local governments to see what they need, and to understand what their relationships are and what those gaps are, or what's working well. I always like to have the positive conversations too, and then how we can support them. So really it's trying to have a unified, at least a unified direction, if not approach, because local government, state government, a little bit different. And you know, Indiana has eminent domain thing here, so we take our county participation and ability to self-govern pretty seriously. But working together with cybersecurity strengthens everybody. So if we can meet together, back to the communication, back to the empathy, back to, you know, trying to fill in gaps, and then take that back to our vendors, that if we have shared vendors or not, which ones are working and which ones aren't. Those are all the conversations to keep going, and for both levels, and trying to keep everybody pointed in the same direction.
For state of Utah, we regularly solicit the municipality's input. So when doing statewide cooperative contracts, which probably many states do, we actually are required to have someone from locals, municipalities, or other things on the evaluation panel so that we know we're meeting their needs, and then they're able to buy off these statewide cooperative contracts. So I think it really helps them to get their input and then to be able to buy off this and leverage the buying power of the whole state.
Dan, we actually have another question that came through for you. As you have been rolling out GovRAMP across state agencies in Utah, how have you been talking through GovRAMP with them, especially since it's a shift from self-attestation?
Yeah, so communications has been mentioned, but that's a big thing. And so what we did was, in getting prepared and going through GovRAMP, we've had 3 training sessions for state agencies. So we're trying to get everyone, we use our security folks to get everyone on the security side. We use our procurement folks to get everyone on the procurement side. We get our agency IT directors to get folks that they know about. And so we've had 3 training sessions to really explain the why and the benefit of this, that this is coming. We put in a kind of a 2-year on-ramp period. So even though we're requiring it for new solicitations, they can just kind of get their foot wet all the way until July 1st of 2027. We had 3 training sessions for vendors. So we tried to blast out to all of our vendors that we had on contract, if we have their contact information, for statewide cooperative contracts and for individual agency contracts. So we tried to get to them to do a training session, and then internally to our own IT department to make sure all of the leaders are on board. We have done some training sessions that way too. And so that's really tried to get everyone to understand this is coming and this is here. But we are still doing that. I think we have some others scheduled coming up, and I think next week, some more training sessions that we're really trying to get the word out about the change.
Yeah, and Emily, I know you're going through kind of similar processes as Dan as well. Do you have any other thoughts to add to that?
I'll just Dan and state of Utah for kind of setting the wake for us, because we've been following your model pretty closely here. Lots of training, I think my own direct staff is a little bit sick of me saying how busy I've been and how many meetings, because it's been so many meetings and those inefficient and effective conversations with our agency partners as well. And understanding that not everybody is in IT compliance and GovRAMP and frameworks and what are we doing here with contracts every day. Our state agencies are, run the gamut of all the services we provide our constituents. So most of the time, I meet them where they're at. Do we need to start from the beginning of what we're trying to do, show them the executive order we have, what we're trying to do with statewide policy. Or if they're already there and they're already asking questions about what do we do with our FedRAMP organizations and what does it look like in 5 years, having those conversations with them to again, point everybody in the same direction and help everybody understand the vision for where we're going. Same thing is happening on the vendor side as well. We've got vendors we've got small, tiny little vendors that only do 1 or 2 things and only for the state of Indiana and maybe only for one agency, all the way to, the big hyperscalers. So again, those conversations, the communication, the people skills, that's all really, really important for what we're doing. With the state agencies, those are my people, right? So having just a lot of patience with where they're at. If we've put out white papers, we have an FAQ on our website. GovRAMP posts our Indiana page. We've done several town halls and so on. So again, thanks to Utah for setting a good example for us that we've been following. And hopefully as folks have become more familiar with what the program is and how to engage with it, I'll get a little bit more time back, but been happy to have those conversations with our folks in the meantime.
Yeah, and Matt, we have another question for you as well. Where do you see providers sometimes unintentionally creating silos, and how can they avoid that?
That's a really good question. I think that there's a bit of a trap for providers or vendors from an enablement and or from a communication perspective. We've talked about sort of legal procurement and security, having a legal to legal conversation, a procurement to procurement conversation, and a security to security conversation. I think the trap for vendors is not to have a holistic offering that converges those. So Dan earlier was talking about SLAs, for example. So like a master services agreement that builds in SLAs that anticipate what security needs in terms of responsiveness for incident response or reporting requirements, those kinds of things. So I think the real trap is having those things fractured and not having a holistic offering when a vendor goes to market. And I'll say also, you know, the enablement materials, you know, reading rooms, documents, those kinds of things that support due diligence. I think they should be designed for the lowest common denominator, not in a hierarchical perspective so much as just they should be designed with the understanding that everybody brings the same background to each of these disciplines. You know, your security people will have a very different background than the procurement and legal folks. And so the more those things are common and shared amongst them all in a holistic offering, I think that guarantees success.
That's great. It looks like we have 2 more questions. This goes more, I think, on the government side, but how have you found the conversations going with small vendors? Have you seen a difference really between small vendors and big vendors?
I'll just go first and then be quiet for since Dan's a little further down the line than I am. The initial questions are all very, very similar and really revolves around, you know, what the impact is going to be to them and their relationship with the state. Our intention is not necessarily to, you know, immediately cut off services and only restrict it to a few vendors. The intention is to get into a more compliant state, to be able to monitor that, to have risk management, and to work together with the vendors to get there. So, you know, smaller vendors, there's going to be some considerations for them. Obviously, you know, working with GovRAMP on what that membership looks like and what level they need to get to. GovRAMP's been a great partner there and kind of filling in for us, so you can do your own sales pitch, if you will. And then where we need them to be on the state side and what their compliance needs to be, depending on the type of data and so on. So very similar conversations initially, and then depending on the scope of what they're doing for us, it kind of spreads out from there.
Emily, I wish I could give you, you know, some real life examples. Right now, since we're just pretty new into this, I haven't really come across, you know, a difference between the small vendors and the large vendors. There, as Emily mentioned, we are communicating and we're trying to get both there. We're trying to get both to understand the value of this and the need to have this partnership with the state and vendors. And so, right now, things are going well. We haven't had any really pushback. We'll be mindful of small vendors as well as large vendors. We'll try to get them both to get there and into GovRAMP. And then, you know, maybe a few months down the road, you can ask me again if we've had any issues with that. But right now, things are good.
Well, we're coming up to the end of our Q&A session, and I just want to say a huge thank you to our panelists for those insights and participating in the crucial discussion today. Something that I really noticed here is that it really just seems like a people-first approach. You know, we can't do any of this or succeed together if we aren't communicating and building those relationships. But the last thing I'd like to ask if you just share one piece of advice for building stronger cloud security partnerships across the ecosystem. Can you each just share one more piece? Matt, we'll start with you.
Ooh, I would say everything's going to take longer than you think. So start now, start tomorrow, start after this meeting, whatever starting looks like to you, whether you're a government, whether you're a vendor, whether you're a customer, start now because everything's going to take longer than you think. It's getting better and better all the time, but still time takes time.
I'll go ahead and next I'll say, you know, stick to the basics. If the scope seems to be getting too big, if there's too many questions, if there's too much uncertainty, stick to the basics. Who your people are, what are you trying to do, what's your scope? If the scope is creeping on you, what are you going to do about that? You know, and just try to keep yourself grounded. You know, we're not going to solve all of the cybersecurity problems in a single day or a single month. By the time you solve this one, there's going to be 50 more. So, kind of buckle up for the long ride, I guess, and bring snacks with you, and just be patient with the people you're working with. And just keep in mind, we're hopefully all trying to do the same thing, which is to keep the lights on and stuff safe for folks. So that's been helpful for us, and hopefully that is something that even a little bit of joking, and in a high stress environment, sometimes can go a long way. So good luck.
And I'll say, besides the GovRAMP, the GovRamp's going to make that that partnership and that shared responsibility. And but besides that, for vendors, I'm going to say results. If we want it, we want you to be someone we want to do business with. So please provide the results and the long-term partnership. And for agencies, state agencies, we need to be arm's length from the vendors, but at the same time, sometimes that goes overboard. And so I would say embrace the vendor interactions. They're super important to be able to do the things we want to get done and to get our strategic plan done.
Well, that's amazing. Again, thank you guys so much, Dan, Matt, and Emily. You guys have all been such a pleasure to work with and great partners and champions of GovRAMP, and we're excited for moving forward and what's next. So again, thank you for your time, and we're a couple minutes early. Oh, thank you. Oh, sorry, I thought we had a hand up. But we're a couple minutes early, but as long as everybody's okay with it, I think we can move into our office hours for the day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Again, so here we are in our office hours today with an informal Q&A where you can ask GovRAMP leadership and the PMO your questions. I'm pleased to be joined today by Leah McGrath, Executive Director at GovRAMP, Jessica Van Eerdy, Chief of Operations and General Counsel at GovRAMP, Naomi Ward, Government Engagement Director at GovRAMP, and Julia Miller, the GovRAMP PMO Manager. Again, please feel free to drop any questions in the Q&A and we'll address as many as we can. Thank you.
I just want, while we're waiting on questions, I just want to say how much I've appreciated everyone joining us this week and all of the speakers. It's been such a delight, and every day I learned something. We're going to continue this discussion at our summit. And one of the things that we really try to do, hopefully this gave you a taste of that, is to go a little deeper into these topics when we're talking about the intersection of procurement, industry, security, and that ongoing partnership, not just in the services being delivered, but around how we continue to secure data, critical infrastructure, and really protect our citizens through that joint effort. So we're going to be talking more about that, going a little bit deeper. And the closer we get, the more excited I am becoming, because I think we've got just the speakers, the lineup, the topics are going to be fantastic. But as you can see just here today in the conversations, there is nothing that beats that in-person communication with our community and all the different stakeholders coming together. So really hope that you can join us. And just thanks to the team who brought this week together to give us, I think, a little taste of the summit and what's to come.
All right. I just got a question that says, we haven't onboarded as a municipality yet, but I'm wondering how GovRAMP handles post-breach notifications in your levels.
So that's a great question. And so this is actually all outlined in our continuous monitoring escalation guide, and I think is really helpful and important, right? This is one of the ways that we like to say GovRAMP moves governments from assessor to oversight and allows you to have proactive information as you make risk-based decisions. So, for example, if a provider has given access to a vendor, or not a vendor, rather, a government to see their continuous monitoring, what would happen is if there was something that rose to the level of us needing to alert governments to an issue with that continuous monitoring package, we would do so. There are certain sentiments around, certain requirements around breaches that we would review at the PMO, on the PMO side, and then based upon those, notifications would go out to those governments that have access to let them know you probably need to get in the portal and take a look. And that's kind of just an ongoing thing, right? It's not just about breaches. It's about, is there a vulnerability that's open too long? Is there a lack of compliance in some other manner with a certain control? And if the PMO has done their due diligence with the provider to try and rectify that, and the provider has not rectified that, they go on what is called a corrective action plan, and that is when a government is made aware, hey, there's something in here you need to take a look at. So again, it's not just about breaches, it's about all the many ways that we're reviewing that continuous monitoring to make sure that the information that you have is what you need and is in line with the NIST 853 framework that we've built our standard around. I don't know if anybody else on our office hours wants to pick up on that as well.
I think you nailed it, Jessica. I think, one of the things that we really try to do is help simplify that process. We often call ourselves the bridge between whether it's procurement and security or IT or vendor risk management on the public sector side, but also between industry. And so Julia with the PMO does just a phenomenal job with her team, really managing that the continuous monitoring process. I think one of the real benefits is knowing that our PMO is every month looking at the continuous monitoring, the reporting, managing any kind of potential escalations that are needed, so that you can, if you're on the public sector side, know that you are going to be reached out to when needed for those that you have access to, so you can log in and take hopefully early action as needed. So Julia, I don't know if you have any, I know we have a few more questions, but I like to call on Julia here because she does such a phenomenal job with this process.
Yeah, I'm usually the one behind the curtain, making sure everything else is moving. No, the ability to still be able to manage the continuous monitoring and show those results on a regular basis to those government entities and those agencies, just to show that this is going way beyond just the snapshot of the authorization and as well as the reviews. It is a continuous review that we perform, and we're always in contact with the CSPs when there is challenges that they're facing, and we try to do our best to work those out and understand their own environment. So it's a great opportunity for any government agency to take a look at the continuous monitoring of any of the CSPs that we have made as far as ready authorization, or even at the ready verified status, I should say. But yes, thank you.
Thanks, Julia. We did get a question from Jonathan Askins in the chat asking, can a university system join at a system level, or does that require membership at an institution level? And I'm going to give you, a great answer, and that is, it depends. So it truly depends on how your organization is structured. It depends on what the signature delegation and signature authority looks like in your particular organization. We have had some who have come in and said, we at a top level really want to handle this top down. So we want this to be institution-wide, handled at the top, and then every organization or system within the organization will route through us. We have had others who have said, it's perfectly fine. We don't have the manpower at the institution level to do this. So we're fine with each individual system signing their own agreement. So it can be either way. I would strongly just recommend you reach out to your government engagement director to ask that question. If you don't know, just for the broader group, if you don't know who your government engagement director is, if you email get@govramp.org, we will find you. I promise. And we will connect you with the exact right person that you need. Thank you, Naomi, for dropping that in the chat. If you, Otherwise, if you know who your government engagement director is, please just reach out directly and we can actually talk through that question about the systems and institutions a little bit more specific to your organization. Janet, I do just want to add a little nuance. So I see you say geographically your office is in North Carolina. So I will tell you, Amy Ventura is on this call. She would be your government engagement director. I believe I've seen maybe a couple emails from you. I do think that there might be, thank you, Jonathan. I do think that there might be a little bit more nuance because of your organization type. So please feel free to reach out to Amy and we can drill into that and make sure if Amy is not the right person for you, that we get you to the right person. And again, emails are super easy. First name at GovRAMP. So Amy at GovRAMP, and we will happily get that all sorted out and resolved for you, Janet.
I have another question in the Q&A here that says, how does GovRAMP help with fourth risk? The current sales loft drift breach highlight this risk today.
Leah, do you want to tackle that one?
I mean, I think for sure we know supply chain as it relates to risk is a big deal. And with AI, it's a bigger deal, right? Potentially. And so I think it becomes even more important for us to be having conversations like this, for you to be understanding shared responsibilities, who your vendors are, who their vendors are. And that's why we are also, as it relates to AI, we have an ongoing AI security task force as well. Because one of the things that we've heard from our participating governments especially is the concern that, hey, I don't even know my inventory. I don't know when AI is turned on, and I'm talking about Gen AI or agentic AI. I don't even know as a user, as an owner, when the AI is turned on within a cloud product I may be using, or when there's an API, right, to an AI solution. And so just visibility and transparency in our partnerships is so critical, and probably more now because AI is doing wonderful things. I just want to be really clear. We think this is a fantastic innovation in technology. And so what we're trying to do is help create visibility and transparency in the process so that we can really enable innovation, enable the use of these tools. But that does require transparency, visibility, especially when we're talking about security. So I think some of the recent events that have happened that we're probably all reading about in the news just underscore the importance of having these conversations. If you haven't started your supply chain risk management program, start today. If you haven't started down the path with GovRAMP in terms of understanding if you're a provider, you know, where you are in your risk maturity or your cyber maturity, start today. And I think that is why we've put so much emphasis in making sure that we can meet all of our stakeholders wherever you are in your journey. If you are just beginning a risk management program on the public sector side, or you have a really mature one, I think there are many ways for us to plug into support. Now we've seen all sorts of use cases, which is fantastic, whether we are kind of the foundation of risk management or used in an adjunct function to kind of fill in greater detail. That's an option as well. For the private sector, wherever you are in your journey, whether it's starting with a snapshot to have visibility into kind of where your strengths, where your gaps, or continuing on to those verified statuses, it's really all about having visibility in your supply chain, having transparency in the risk that you have so that you can better manage it and stay ahead of these. I don't know, Jessica, if that kind of answers the question or if anyone else has anything else to add, but you know, I do think we're seeing more and more of these types of events, and we'll continue to do so because AI is speeding up not only the opportunities from a work perspective, but unfortunately can have a pretty big impact on cyber events as well if we're not really managing that closely. Is that helpful?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I have another question too. Are there any plans to include SBOM aspects in your requirements?
That is coming up quite a bit. SBOMs is how you would say that. And
Thank
that's
you.
coming up. Nope, you're good. Quite a bit in in our discussions in particular around our AI security task force, and we're thinking about how to, where that fits. So it's a great question.
I don't know if I've missed any other questions in the chat.
There was one question I was thinking, and we may have touched on it a little bit, but I thought it was such a good one because we hear this so often. And so I'm kind of going through these, but have you had issues with agencies, quote, needing a vendor that isn't yet GovRAMP? I'm sort of modifying a question because I'm putting a few questions together with that. And I think that's in regards, we hear this often. I'm going to call it, the chicken and the egg question. Well, I would participate with GovRAMP if I'm on an agency side, but I want to see more vendors on the authorized product list or in the progressing product list. And so that was a question or concern we heard early on, which is why we developed the snapshot program, the new core status, and why, if you look at our procurement best practices toolkit, and major shout out to Jessica for that one. She worked tirelessly with NASPO, our partners, and leads our procurement committee to keep those fresh. But why in our procurement toolkit, you'll see lots of options for an on-ramp or a runway. And Dan alluded to this in Utah. And so I kind of wanted to go back to that. But Jessica, if you want to just describe the runway, the on-ramp that we've really developed that I think helps kind of counter the concern that we've heard sometimes, that chicken and egg question.
Absolutely. And I think I'm just going to say my standard, right? I say this at every single event I go to with government individuals who raise a question similar to this. And that is, if I am a vendor and I am held to a multitude of compliance standards, what is the incentive for me to continue to do something like this if my governments keep saying, well, the list, guess who drives that growth on that list? It's the governments. So if you want to be a good partner, right? And I think one of the things that I've seen us talk about now all 3 days is partnership. Even Dan, right? And I loved this. Oh, I did like a happy dance. You couldn't see me. I was off camera because he's in procurement. And he said, too often we see you want to keep people at arm's length, but we go too far, right? We have to partner with each other. So governments are doing their vendors a favor, really, by giving an on-ramp. And then the vendors are actually building that list for those governments, right? So it is that chicken and the egg. So building an on-ramp is really the best, if you will, the best way we have seen this to be successful in all sorts of organizations. Utah, Arizona, now Indiana, really saying, look, we understand you're not going to be able to be at authorized, as an example, tomorrow. So what we would like is you have a contract with us, you're enrolled in the Progressing Snapshot program, and you're going to be in that program until you have the first verified status, which now with the rolling out of core earlier this year, that's core. And they give a time frame. And that time frame can vary, right? It could be 8 months, it could be 12 months, but there's a set period of time that you have that you can build your maturity in Progressing Snapshot before you need to achieve that first verified status. And at that point, let's use Utah as an example. What they have said is for most data, that's going to be okay if it's not private, highly personal, sensitive data. You can stay at core and they're going to be fine with that. But you know what? If you need to go further, you need to get to authorized. And we're going to give you a timeline and a time frame at which you need to get there, which could be anywhere between 12 and 24 months, or rather 18 and 24 months. My apologies. So really what these organizations are doing are helping not just mature their own programs, but mature the program of the vendor that they're working with, big or small. And we are very proud of the fact that we have a lot of small to medium-sized businesses in our program, because our program makes it so that they can join and that they can play in the pool with the bigger fish, right? So this is one of those ways where I think It is the chicken and the egg, like Leah said. And I feel personally like our governments have a duty, not just to their constituents to protect the data, but to be fair to their vendors and to think about their vendors in this process. And so by giving an on-ramp, you're not only helping your fellow government neighbors who are also coming on board after you, but you're also helping your vendors get where they need to go. And in the end, what you're doing is making the nation safer as a whole. And we're really saying we're going to hold people to a certain set of standards. And now suddenly that compliance process is a lot easier for your vendors because they're not trying to comply with, let's just be nice and say 50 state compliance processes, but we all know it's a whole lot more than that. So I think I just waxed on my soapbox for, a little while there. I'm sorry. This is how I feel about this. I feel very strongly about this. But Leah, I'll kick it back to you.
We all have our own soapboxes. I tend to do that with regulatory or framework harmonization. Jessica's got it on this one, but applause for you. That was fantastic. So thank you.
I do have another question for you
Okay.
from Kate Congdon. Could a CSP regress from somewhere on the authorized side to core and be accepted by a government consumer of services?
So I think what you're asking is that you had authorized and you now want to go backwards and you want to do core instead and still be accepted. And the answer would be, well, it depends on what that contract requirement is. But if you have authorized, and we were actually just having a conversation about this in an earlier meeting, if you have authorized and somebody is asking for core, you would still be accepted because ultimately what you have is greater. So for example, when you see language like that, and we'll be talking with our governments to be sure they understand this too, although I am fairly certain they do, it's sort of like a greater than or equal to, right? So if a government requires core, but let's say for another government, you actually do know you need authorized, you would be better off to have authorized because you will then satisfy the requirements for anybody that wants you at core, but you will also satisfy the requirements for anybody that wants you at authorized. So having authorized is merely just showing you've gone above and beyond what that organization that would want you at core has requested. And I hope that answers your question, Kate.
At this moment, I am not seeing any other questions.
Let me just add one more thing to that because I think this is a really good point and one I just want to make as clear. If your product touches CGIS data, like you're going to be at authorized. Like I just want to make sure that that's really clear for everybody across the board. Core might be a jumping point for you. Like it might be that if you're working with Utah, for example, you could start at progressing, move to core, but you're going to have to get to authorized. If you're touching data like that, I just wanted to make sure that was really clear for the group at large, because I know that that's a big lift. So I don't want anybody to forget that.
I also did see that Kate added, this would be more if a CSP were working toward authorized and not progressing quickly enough.
So that's actually a great question. And that's one where I would say personally, right? And I will let anybody else, Julia, Leah, also like lend your thoughts here. But for me, I would say if you know your goal is authorized, but you're not there yet, it would behoove a CSP to say, look, I got core. I have a verified status. I have made a very clear commitment to security and to working with governments, related to how they view data as very precious and important. So I would personally say, yes, I would use that as a stepping stone, just like the program is designed. And Julia, Leah, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have noticed so many of the people that are coming through the core program, they just don't stop there. They put an extra effort in to commit to getting to those 60 controls of that core, then they're moving forward. There is a huge benefit of working with lessons learned and reaching to that ready status. And it is a small undertaking to do the core. And once you get that momentum and you've developed your internal staff to realize what evidence they need to submit, what's acceptable, it is just another chapter and to get to the next step. So I would always encourage anybody to continue on. Now, there may be a lower risk and which doesn't really require a full authorization, then core may be just great for that particular CSP to meet the requirements for that government agency.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation of that. I did have another question come in. Could you expand a little on the need for authorized for CGIS data?
Do you want me to take that, Jessica?
Yeah, I can or you can. I just feel like I'm just, taking over.
No, you're
here.
good. So,
No, go
so
ahead.
if, we've had, for the past year, and we're getting ready to re-engage our CGIS aligned task force. And we had a lot of input early on from our provider community, as well as especially from our government leaders who are having to meet. CJIS stands for the Criminal Justice Information Services. And so FBI puts out security requirements for handling CJIS data, so criminal justice information data. And one of the things that they have been doing, which really lent itself well to an overlay for us, is working on mapping the CJIS policy requirements for their security requirements to NIST 853. What we then did through our task force was bring everyone together, right? So we had about 50 people in the task force, half public sector, half private sector, who had a lot of knowledge around CJIS requirements. And we were able to map and create an overlay to our moderate impact level authorization. So if you are a service provider who stores, processes, transmits, or could have a potential impact on criminal justice information data, then just like the public sectors, our states, our local entities must conform to those FBI CJIS security policy requirements. That flows down to the provider community as well. So our overlay is mapped to the CJIS security requirements. And really the differences were not so much in the controls required. There were a few additional controls required, but especially in the parameters. So those definitions of what it means to meet a control. And so that's what I would take a look at. If you're an industry member, a private sector member, and you know that your PAS, SAS, or IAS is going to be handling that kind of data, take a look at that overlay. Take a look at the prescribed parameters to understand what you need to be doing to demonstrate conformance to the CJIS requirements. For many of our participating governments, what they're looking at is starting to require, and I think, Jessica, you were referring to this, starting to require, hey, if you are an entity doing business with us and you're going to touch CJIS data, we are going to require that you achieve a GovRAMP authorization at the moderate impact level with that CJIS overlay. And that is to make sure there's good demonstration, evidence-based demonstration that you are conforming with those CJIS requirements that they ultimately have to conform to. So take a look. We are actually going to be updating the overlay here before the end of the year to align with the latest FBI CJIS security policy version 6.0. There are just a few updates to the overlay that we anticipate. And so look for that. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'd be happy to walk through that with you.
And so that hit it, but there was a follow-up question and I just want to hit on that. So is core not adequate? And the answer is no. And like Leah said, when we did our overlay, what we did was we said, okay, CJIS has already mapped these controls to NIST 853. Where is the most alignment between what is required to meet your CJIS auditing requirements and between what is in our security program? And the answer is it's a GovRAMP authorized at a moderate impact level. And there are still some differentiators, and that is why we have an overlay where you would have your provider or your cloud service provider go to that 3PO and say, don't just do my, GovRAMP authorized assessment, also do this overlay, please. And like we have heard from CJIS over and over, there is no certification, but this is a pretty solid, they were involved in our task force, this is a pretty solid, yes, you're going to pass that CJIS audit. Now, I will say it's also important to note that when you inherit systems as a government organization, the smaller your organization, the more likely you're inheriting systems from your state level agencies. They are probably contemplating and thinking about these things. And so if you are a government and you have questions around how CJIS should be handled, specific to your organization, the other resources outside of GovRAMP and your government engagement director you could talk to is potentially your state's CJIS person or whoever at your state agency's systems are being used, because those are likely going to be managed higher level than the smaller organizations. So I hope that helps answer that question.
And there's another question: can a provisionally authorized product, instead of saying be CJIS authorized, achieve that authorization with the CJIS overlay? The answer would be yes, right? You could be provisionally authorized at the moderate impact level with the CJIS overlay. Right.
Great question.
Yes.
Do we have any other questions?
Olivia, I did see one out there pertaining to the difference between the core, which we introduced this year, and its uniquenesses from the difference of ready and authorization. So we were very excited as we evolved. We recognized the fact that there is a need to introduce another verified status such as core. So it could be considered as almost like a pre-ready estate. So a core would end up being 60 of the NIST 853 controls. Then in addition to that, the difference between a core and the ready is that the PMO from the GovRAMP side will evaluate the evidence. So that would require the CSP to upload evidence for those 60 controls. Then at the time of that, we would be authorizing that core status. The uniqueness is here is allowing the 3PO to do the assessment, or no, excuse me, the GovRAMP PMO to do the assessment and not the 3PAO. So there's a cost savings there, but also it also addresses a lower risk in some cases where that product may not require the full 80 or the full 319. So that's the uniquenesses of some of the core. The core also will require quarterly submissions for the continuous monitoring versus the monthly submissions that is required for the ready and authorization. But overall, the core will still continue to have to be reauthorized on an annual basis. So just a quick highlight of that particular question that came through.
Thanks, Julia.
That's great to point out. And I would like to say too, if any of you guys have questions about that moving forward, our PMO team is wonderful in answering those questions for you at pmo@govramp.org. I know you can see Julia's email right there, but if you ever have any further questions, they're always happy to answer them. All right, with that, if we don't have any other questions, I don't want you all to forget to scan the QR code on your screen to register for the GovRAMP Cyber Summit, October 2nd through 3rd in Chicago. I know we had that screen up earlier. Oh, and it's right here. But if you're a GovRAMP member, I'd also like for you to join us for our member-only meeting on October 1st from 3 to 5 p.m. in Chicago, the day before the summit. Over the past 3 days, we've looked at cloud security and collaboration from the provider perspective, explored procurement and risk evaluation for governments, and today brought both sides together to focus on oversight and partnerships. The series we designed was to bring us back to the basics and to help you engage more meaningfully at the summit. We hope you leave with practical takeaways and a stronger understanding of how government and industry can work side by side. And in the coming days, you'll receive a follow-up email with recordings, key links, and an ebook compiling all of this week's sessions as a single source to prepare for Chicago. Thank you all so much, and we will see you in a few weeks.
Thank you.